Nobody saw Ukraine coming, not in the Persian Gulf, not in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, not in the warm, mine-laced waters of the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil supply passes through a corridor so narrow that a single sinking ship could turn global energy markets into a catastrophe overnight. Ukraine is fighting for its survival against one of the largest armies on Earth. Its cities have been struck hundreds of times. Its energy grid has been systematically attacked through 4 brutal winters. Its soldiers have been dying on the front lines every single day for years. And yet, right now, thousands of miles from that front line, in the searing desert heat of Saudi Arabia, more than 10,000 Ukrainian-made acoustic sensors are listening for Iranian drones in the dark. 5 Ukrainian mine hunter warships are counting down the days until they sail into the most dangerous waterway on the planet. Over 200 Ukrainian drone operators are standing in the deserts of the Gulf, training the armies of some of the wealthiest nations on Earth to fight a threat that Ukraine spent 4 years learning how to destroy. This is not a subplot. This is not a footnote to the main event. This is Ukraine playing the most consequential card it has ever held. At the exact moment when the United States, with all its carrier strike groups and destroyers and satellite coverage, needs something that none of its trillion-dollar systems can provide, the thing that only Ukraine actually has. Stay with me. Because what Kyiv just did in the Middle East is rewriting the global security map in ways that will outlast this crisis by decades. And the biggest loser of this transformation is not Iran. It is Russia. To understand why Ukraine's arrival in the Gulf changes everything, you need to understand the specific vulnerability that has been keeping American military commanders awake since the Hormuz crisis began. Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia is not an ordinary military facility. It is the central nervous system of American air operations across the entire Middle East. CENTCOM manages its regional air campaigns from here. Boeing E-3 Sentry, AWACS, early warning aircraft operate from this base. F-35 fighter jets worth hundreds of millions of dollars are stationed here. 13 Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling aircraft, the systems that extend the range of every manned aircraft in the theater, are positioned here. Without the AWACS, American air superiority goes partially blind. Without the tankers, long-range strike operations lose their reach. Prince Sultan is the jugular vein of American military power in the Middle East, and it has a vulnerability that the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world have not fully solved. Iranian Shahed drones. These are not sophisticated weapons. They are slow, cheap, one-way attack drones that fly at low altitude in swarms, designed to overwhelm systems built for a different threat environment. Patriot missile batteries, designed for ballistic missile defense at altitude, struggle against targets flying below their optimal engagement envelope in numbers large enough to saturate the available interceptor inventory. An attack last March demonstrated this with brutal clarity. An E-3 Sentry being targeted on a dark night over a Saudi Arabian base pushed the Pentagon toward an urgent and uncomfortable realization. The most expensive military force in human history had a gap, a cheap, simple gap. And filling it required expertise that America's defense budget had not produced. Ukraine had. 4 years of fighting Iran's exact weapons on Ukrainian soil produced something no defense laboratory could replicate. Combat-proven doctrine for defeating Shahed, swarms at scale, in real conditions, against an adversary actively adapting the same attack patterns that Iranian forces were now deploying in the Gulf. The result was the Sky Fortress Initiative, backed by Ukraine's Brave One Defense Innovation Program. The technology it produced was not what any conventional procurement process would have arrived at. Acoustic sensors, microphone-based detection systems that capture the specific engine noise signatures of drones flying too low for radar to detect. Originally developed from adapted cell phone microphone components, they evolved into specialized military hardware refined enough to distinguish a desert bird's wing beat from a Shahed 136 engine signature in 1/10 of a second. More than 10,000 of these sensors are now deployed across Saudi Arabia, creating a listening network covering ground no radar system can see. Each sensor feeds data continuously to an AI-supported command center that processes thousands of simultaneous acoustic inputs and identifies threat signatures in real time. The AI filters desert wind noise, ignores generator hum, discriminates between vehicle traffic and an approaching drone swarm, and when it detects the threat, calculates route, speed, and probable target within seconds. The sensors are invisible, buried behind sand dunes, concealed in abandoned structures, mounted on base perimeter fences in configurations that no observer would identify as a defense system. The invisibility is not incidental. It is architectural. A detection system that cannot be located cannot be destroyed. When the threat is identified, what Ukraine deploys against it is not a Patriot missile worth millions of dollars. It is an interceptor drone. Ukrainian-made Marop systems, or American RTX Coyote interceptors, cheap and fast, guided by the same AI network that detected the incoming swarm, diving into the threat formation in coordinated network-connected attack patterns. cheap weapons defeating cheap weapons, intelligence defeating mass. At Prince Sultan Air Base right now, American soldiers are receiving training on the system from Ukrainian instructors who learned it by doing it, under fire, against the real thing. The world's most powerful military being taught by a nation fighting for its survival to defend its own bases, using a system that the world's most powerful military had not developed. That is the strategic reality no press release has captured. And it is happening every day in the Saudi desert. Saudi Arabia's airspace is being sealed from above. The acoustic network, the AI processing architecture, the interceptor drone response layer, all interlocking into a detection and defeat system that operates silently, making kills that never make the news, because the attacks that are defeated never reach the visibility threshold that would generate a news cycle. That silence is strategic. Every successful Iranian drone attack on Gulf infrastructure generates headlines. Headlines generate risk assessments. Risk assessments generate investment flight. Investment flight costs Gulf economies billions of dollars that no oil revenue can quickly replace. Ukraine understood this because Ukraine lived it. Every Russian strike on Ukrainian infrastructure that succeeded was covered globally and generated pressure, uncertainty, and psychological damage beyond the physical destruction. The lesson Ukraine learned and is now teaching is that the most strategically valuable defense system is the one that makes the enemy's attacks invisible by making them fail so completely and so quietly they generate no signal at all. Iran's swarm strategy depends on creating fear. Fear requires visible impact. Ukraine's acoustic interception network is designed specifically to deny Iran that visible impact. No successful strike means no headline, means no fear, means no leverage. Iran's most cost-effective weapon is being quietly neutralized in the Saudi desert by a technology that started as repurposed cell phone microphones. Now look at the water. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through that corridor flows 20% of the world's entire oil supply every single day. Every vessel moving through those waters operates in an environment where Iran has pre-positioned contact mines, where Revolutionary Guard speedboats can emerge from coastal inlets with minimal warning, and where a single successful attack on a large vessel creates an oil price shock felt in every economy on Earth within hours. Iran understands that it does not need to sink 100 ships to control the strait. It needs to create the credible threat of sinking one. That threat alone drives insurance premiums to levels that make commercial transit economically irrational. When insurance rates for a single Hormuz voyage exceed the value of the cargo, the shipping network reroutes and the global supply disruption happens without Iran firing a weapon. Mines are the foundation of this strategy. Cheap, passive, difficult to detect, capable of remaining dormant for months before activating. Contact mines stealthily dropped in shipping lanes that supertankers must follow because they're draft limits where they can navigate. The international response requires specialized mine-clearing vessels, specialized equipment, and the specific training that only comes from extensive operational experience with naval mines in real combat environments. Ukraine just sent 4 mine hunter warships to Hormuz, with a 5th arriving from the Netherlands shortly. These are not hastily assembled vessels pressed into a role they were not designed for. The British-built Cherkasy and Chernihiv are Sandown-class ships optimized specifically for mine hunting, featuring hull materials with near-zero magnetic signatures that prevent triggering the very mines they are searching for. The Belgian and Dutch-built Mariupol and Melitopol are Alkmaar-class vessels equipped with remotely operated underwater vehicles and advanced magnetic acoustic scanning systems that can map individual mines without requiring a human diver to approach them. These ships defeat mines at a distance, using unmanned submarine vehicles to approach detected targets, plant remotely detonated charges, and trigger the mine from a position of safety. Operations that would require weeks of dangerous close contact work using conventional methods can be completed in hours. No Ukrainian sailor needs to be in the water when the explosion occurs. Training was completed at the UK's Portsmouth Naval Base to NATO standards. Ukrainian naval officers are sitting at the strategy planning table steering the operation, not as consultants, but as the most experienced practitioners in the room. Because here is the critical detail. The Ukrainian Navy is the most mine-experienced naval force in the world. Russia seeded the Black Sea with thousands of mines during the war. Ukraine's naval forces developed mine-clearing doctrine in real operational conditions against real Russian mines in waters where failure meant loss of vessels and crews. The accumulated knowledge represents an institutional expertise that no other navy currently operating in Hormuz possesses. Ukraine is not joining this operation as a junior partner. It is arriving as the dominant authority. And Iran knows it. Now look at what is happening at the level that will shape Gulf security not for months, but for decades. The 10-year defense agreements Ukraine signed with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE are not equipment sales with a maintenance contract. They are comprehensive security partnerships, including joint production facilities, advanced electronic warfare software development, AI-supported air defense integration, and the institutional military relationships that transform both parties' capabilities simultaneously. The detail that sealed these agreements was not the specific capabilities Ukraine was offering. It was Ukraine's attitude toward delivering them. Gulf states have spent decades navigating American defense procurement processes: congressional approval, diplomatic review, technology transfer restrictions, export control compliance, bureaucratic timelines measured in years from initial request to operational deployment. Ukraine's offer was different. The representatives from Kyiv sat across from Gulf military planners, looked at the requirements, looked at the timeline, and said they could have the system operational and training underway tomorrow morning. Not months, not a congressional review cycle. Tomorrow. That operational urgency, forged through 4 years of fighting, where delay meant casualties rather than missed milestones, has become one of Ukraine's most valuable strategic assets. Gulf states facing real threats on real timelines do not want the world's best defense system on a 5-year delivery schedule. They want the most capable available, system operational, before the next Iranian drone swarm appears. Ukraine delivers on that timeline because Ukraine has no other timeline. The Mura, V5, and Sea Baby unmanned surface vessels that Ukraine is offering Gulf states complete the naval architecture that the acoustic detection network and mine hunters begin. These are the systems that drove the Russian Black Sea Fleet from Crimea to Novorossiysk. That sank Russian warships at ranges and in conditions Russian commanders had not calculated as threats. That disabled a Russian submarine. That struck the Kerch Bridge. That demonstrated definitively that a technologically inferior naval force can achieve strategic objectives against a conventionally superior opponent when its unmanned systems are designed and operated correctly. In the Strait of Hormuz, these drones patrol around supertankers as invisible defensive escorts. Their speed of 50 miles per hour gives them intercept capability against Revolutionary Guard speedboats that conventional escort vessels struggle to match. When Iranian fast boats appear approaching a protected tanker convoy, the Mura drones move to intercept before the threat reaches engagement distance. The capability that makes this system transformative is what Ukraine demonstrated in the Black Sea and is now bringing to Hormuz. The Mura can launch aerial interceptor drones from its deck. A naval drone that is also an aerial drone carrier provides simultaneous defense against surface threats and aerial threats. Against Iranian Shaheds approaching from the air and Iranian fast boats approaching from the water simultaneously, the Mura provides an answer in both dimensions without requiring separate assets for each. The Wolfpack tactic extends this further. Multiple Mura drones operating in coordinated formation around a single protected tanker, each covering a different sector of the threat envelope, sharing targeting data through a networked system, present a defensive architecture that Iran's swarm strategy cannot defeat through simple numerical advantage. You cannot overwhelm a networked defense with a swarm when the defense is itself a networked swarm. Iran built its Hormuz strategy around the assumption that conventional escort capability would have gaps, speed gaps, coverage gaps, reaction time gaps. The Mura system eliminates those gaps by operating at the speed and in the numbers that gap elimination requires. Now look at what this means for Russia, because this is where the full geopolitical dimension of Ukraine's Gulf intervention lands. For years, Moscow built its Middle Eastern arms export strategy around a single proposition. Russian systems, specifically the S-400 air defense platform and broader Russian military technology family, offered an alternative to American weapons that did not come with the political strings and approval processes that American defense sales required. Gulf states wanting capability without congressional review found Russia a willing and efficient supplier. That market is now being captured by Ukraine. The country Russia invaded to prevent from becoming a competitor is now competing directly with Russia for the defense contracts of nations that Russia was selling weapons to. Every Ukrainian 10-year deal signed with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar is a Russian contract that will not be signed. Every Ukrainian acoustic sensor deployed at Prince Sultan Air Base is a Russian system that was not selected. Every Ukrainian mine hunter operating in Hormuz is a demonstration of capability that Russian naval forces cannot credibly offer because Russia's navy is currently in retreat in the Black Sea from the same Ukrainian systems being offered to Gulf states. The geopolitical irony is complete. Russia is losing the Middle Eastern defense market to Ukraine. Russia is watching its own naval deterrence in the Black Sea collapse against Ukrainian systems simultaneously being marketed to Gulf monarchies as their security solution. Russia is seeing the country it designated for subjugation transform into a global military technology exporter competing in markets Moscow had treated as secure. But this is not simply a commercial loss for Russia. It is a strategic signal to every government in the world about what military credibility actually means in the current era. Military credibility used to correlate with size. The largest army, the biggest defense budget, the most aircraft carriers. These metrics made sense when systems were rarely tested in conditions approximating actual combat. That era is ending. What Gulf states discovered when evaluating Ukraine's offerings against competing alternatives was that combat proven in real conditions against real adversaries with real countermeasures is worth more than any specification sheet. A drone interceptor system that has defeated thousands of Shahed attacks in Ukrainian airspace carries a different assurance than a system that performed perfectly in a controlled test range. A mine-clearing doctrine developed through 4 years of operational experience against real Russian naval mines carries a different assurance than doctrine developed through simulation. Ukraine has 4 years of the most intensive modern warfare ever recorded, serving as its product demonstration. No competitor can replicate that demonstration, and the world's richest states are responding accordingly. The economic exchange embedded in these deals is equally striking. Ukraine is providing its most valuable current asset, combat-proven military technology, and the expertise to operate it, in exchange for what it needs most: direct cash transfers, energy supply guarantees, advanced missile technology that feeds back into Ukraine's own defense production. A nation that was begging for artillery ammunition in its darkest operational moments is now billing the world's richest sovereign wealth funds for security services, receiving oil, fuel, money, and weapons technology in return. Over 200 Ukrainian drone operators and military experts are actively serving on the ground across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. This consultancy network, which has spread to Jordan, constitutes the first concrete steps of a new security doctrine rapidly spreading across the Middle East. These battle-hardened soldiers are teaching local forces the fine details of drone warfare, countermeasures, acoustic detection, and naval defense that no Western defense contractor can teach, because no Western defense contractor developed them under fire. The transformation in Ukraine's global position this represents is not fully captured by any single development. Ukraine entered this war as a country dependent on others for its existence, dependent on Western ammunition supplies, financial transfers, political support to sustain the coalition that kept Russian pressure from becoming overwhelming. It was a recipient of security guarantees from nations that could have reduced that support at any political moment. That dependency has not disappeared. Ukraine still needs Western support, but something fundamental has changed in the nature of those relationships. Ukraine is no longer only a recipient. It is a provider, offering capabilities its partners cannot provide for themselves, to customers paying generously for access to those capabilities. The Gulf states need Ukraine's acoustic detection network. They need Ukraine's mine-clearing expertise. They need Ukraine's drone warfare doctrine. They need the 200 operators on the ground teaching skills no Western defense contractor can teach. Ukraine needs Gulf oil, money, missile technology, and energy security guarantees, protecting Ukrainian heating through the winters Russia has tried to make unbearable. This is not charity. It is a partnership between equals, each providing what the other cannot obtain elsewhere. That equality is a fundamentally different strategic position for Ukraine than the one it occupied in February 2022. Step back and look at the complete picture of what Ukraine has constructed in the Gulf in months. In the air, over Saudi Arabia, 10,000 acoustic sensors listening for threats that radar cannot see, processing through AI systems that classify in fractions of a second, feeding targeting data to interceptor drone swarms that defeat Iranian Shahed attacks before they generate a headline. American soldiers trained by Ukrainian instructors on a system that the world's largest defense budget had not produced. In the water, 4 minehunter warships operating with hull signatures below the detection threshold of the mines they hunt, crewed by the most mine-experienced naval force on Earth, clearing the threat environment that Iran's most strategic passive weapon creates in the Strait. A 5th vessel arriving from the Netherlands, Ukrainian officers steering the strategy. On the surface and across the threat spectrum, more naval drones patrolling tanker corridors at 50 miles per hour, providing simultaneous air and surface threat response, operating in wolf pack formations that mirror Iran's offensive swarm tactics and defeat them defensively. Behind all of it, decade-long multi-billion-dollar defense partnerships with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, creating joint production facilities for the next generation of these systems. Integrating Ukrainian electronic warfare software into Gulf defense architectures, positioning Ukraine not as a weapons supplier, but as a co-developer of the security doctrine that will define Gulf defense strategy through the 2030s. There is one final dimension that gives the whole picture its ultimate significance. Ukraine is demonstrating something to every government on Earth about the nature of power in the 21st century. Power used to correlate directly with size. Largest army, biggest defense budget, most aircraft carriers. These metrics determined who had influence and who received protection. Ukraine has none of those things in the traditional sense. Its army is stretched. Its defense budget exists on Allied life support. It has no aircraft carriers. And yet Ukraine is protecting American military bases with sensors that American defense procurement had not developed, clearing mines from the world's most strategically critical waterway with the most experienced mine-clearing force on Earth. training Gulf armies in drone warfare doctrine that no Western institution can match, signing decade-long defense partnerships with sovereign wealth funds, shaping those nations' military capabilities through the 2030s. What Ukraine has is not size. It is relevance. Combat-proven, operationally demonstrated, immediately deployable relevance to the specific problems that the most important actors in the current strategic environment actually need solved. Iran built its Hormuz strategy around decades of accumulated threat infrastructure, naval mines, fast boat swarms, shade drone production at scale. Each element designed to create an asymmetric cost imposition that conventional naval power could not efficiently counter. Ukraine spent 4 years building counters to every one of those elements, not in laboratories, in combat. Against the Russian versions of the exact same weapons, refined through thousands of operational engagements, adapted through failure and success in conditions that no peacetime testing environment replicates. The acoustic sensors that detect Shaheds before radar sees them were developed because Shaheds were killing Ukrainians. The mine hunters that are clearing Hormuz were developed because Russian mines were killing Ukrainian sailors. The Mura drones that intercept fast boats and launch aerial interceptors simultaneously were developed because Ukraine needed to defeat a navy that vastly outnumbered it. Every capability Ukraine is deploying in the Gulf was born from necessity in Ukraine, and that necessity produced something that billions of defense budget dollars and decades of peacetime procurement had not. It produced the answer to Iran's strategy. The Strait of Hormuz will open, not because Iran chose to open it,